Erev Tov from Jerusalem. And needless to say, the past 24 hours are not what we had expected. But then again, everything during the past 6 months were not what we expected. Um, and there's a saying found at the end of Pirkei Avot, at the end of chapter 5, it says, Hafoch ba va'apech ba dekule ba. Turn it over and turn it over again because everything is in it. And the subject of the sentence is the Torah. And we'll understand the Torah in its broadest sense, in this case, the Haggadah. And my topic is, what can we learn from the Haggadah about our current crisis? And even though, as all of us, I've read the Haggadah many times, and I've taught a course on the Haggadah perhaps 10 times, and I've published the Shechter Haggadah together with Dr. Joshua Culp, nonetheless, when you read the Haggadah again in light of current events, you come up with emphases or insights that you might not have previously had. So I'm going to share with you 6 insights about Pesach this year, taken directly from the Haggadah. That will be followed by Rabbi Yaron Becker, the Dean of the Shechter Rabbinical Seminary, sharing with you some supplemental readings for the Seder from a beautiful booklet that she put together with a lot of other people, which is being published on the internet both in Hebrew and in an abbreviated English version, which I edited. And finally, Rabbi Dr. Reb Mimi Feigelson will talk about Hasidic sparks from the Haggadah. So the first insight has to do with this. According to Sefer HaChinuch, which is one of the lists of the 613 commandments, which was written in Spain in the 13th century. Today we know it was written by Rabbi Aaron Alevi of Barcelona. He says that it's a positive commandment to rejoice on the 3 pilgrim festivals, as it is written, V'samachta b'chagecha, and you shall rejoice in your festivals. But of course, this year it is difficult to rejoice. Some 1,200 Jews, Arabs, and foreign workers were murdered on October 7th by terrorists. 260 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza since the Israeli army entered Gaza a few weeks later. And 250 innocent people were taken hostage, of whom some 133 are still being held by Hamas and other terrorists. Even so, I believe that there are 6 insights we can derive from the Haggadah this year about our current situation. And the first might be a no-brainer, and that is hospitality. At the very beginning of the Seder, we have the beautiful paragraph in Aramaic, Halachmanya. One of the sentences says, Kol dichvin yetev yechol, kol ditzrich yetev yifsach. Whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. Whoever is in need, let him come and share our Pesach. And this sentence is actually based on a story found in the Tractate of Ta'anit in the Babylonian Talmud, folio 20b. And there that we are told that Rav Huna, one of the famous Amoraim, who lived around the year 350 of the Common Era, that Rav Huna, Kidakarach Rifta, whenever he broke bread, would announce, Kol dichvin yetev yechol, whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. In other words, this was not a custom that originally began on Pesach. This was what Rav Huna did all year long. Whenever he held a meal in his house, he would welcome strangers, poor people, to partake in the meal. Whoever is hungry, let him come and eat. And indeed, as I will stress in a video, which you hopefully will get before Pesach, this concept of Hachnasat Orchim, of welcoming the stranger and the hungry, is not limited to Rav Huna or the Seder. We find it in many places in the Tanakh and the Bible. The story of Abraham and the angels in Genesis chapter 18. The story of Rebekah and Eliezer at the well. The way that Eliezer figures out that Rebekah is worthy of marrying Isaac is because she brings water to him and his camels. And the story of Yitro, Jethro, and Moshe at the beginning of the book of Shemot, when he runs away from Egypt to Midian, and Jethro welcomes Moshe into his house, and of course Moshe then marries Jethro's daughter. The story of Manoach and the angel in the book of Judges. The story of the Shunammite woman and Elisha in the second book of Kings. And we also have 2 famous verses from the Bible that stress this concept of Hachnasat Orchim, or of giving food to the poor. In Isaiah chapter 58, which we read on Yom Kippur morning, V'halo paros lara'ev lachmecha, v'aniyim merudim tavi bait. Share your bread to the hungry, and very poor people bring into your house. And in the book of Job, chapter 31, Bachutz lo yalin gerd latay la'orach eftach. A stranger shall not sleep outside your home. You should open your door to the guest. And this emphasis continues on through rabbinic literature. And for example, in Baba Batra, we are told, Od minhag gadol haya b'Yerushalayim, there was a great custom in Jerusalem before the destruction of the Second Temple. There was a cloth spread over the entrance. When it was there, guests entered. When it was removed, they did not. That was the signal that the house is open, that anyone can come into my home and join me for a meal. And finally, we get to our passage in the Haggadah. But you, of course, may say, well, today we don't actually do this. I mean, we may recite Kol Dichvin Yetev Yechol, but in most places, we don't actually open our door and go out into the street and look for people to come into our homes. So what happened? Well, what happened is explained by Rab Matityahu Gaon, one of the Gaonim in Babylon who lived in the 9th century. And he answers that very question. He says, why don't we open our doors anymore and simply invite people into our homes? He says because of, he would say, because of security issues, it's no longer safe or appropriate to do so. What we do instead is what we call Kimcha de Pischa, which literally means flour for Pesach, which is that before Pesach, and this is not me talking, this is Rab Matityahu Gaon talking some 1,200 years ago. Before Pesach, we give out food and money to the poor so that they will have a matzah and other provisions for the Seder so that they can make their own Seder. In other words, rather than inviting all of the poor into our homes, which isn't practical, we will give them the wherewithal, the money and the food before Pesach so that they can have provisions for the Seder for the holiday of Pesach. And it has been my custom for many, many years. I used to go every year and bring money that I collected to the Rabbanit Kapach, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who gave out 6,000 portions of food every year before Pesach. And her daughter, Naomi, continues this practice, and every year I give her money to do exactly that. Now, what does this have to do with our current situation? I think that one of the beautiful things we have seen since the war began on October 7th is the incredible outpouring of hospitality throughout the state of Israel. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have welcomed strangers into their homes, baked and cooked food for huge numbers of soldiers. My wife, Dori, every week bakes either cakes or chalot to give to soldiers. And my job is to deliver them to the woman who delivers them to another person who delivers them to the soldiers. And this is going on all over the state of Israel. And in addition, hundreds of thousands of people have given food and clothing and other items to the hundreds of thousands of evacuees who've been evacuated from their homes in the north and the south. In other words, this Pesach custom of Kol Dichvin Yetev Yechol has become the norm in Israeli society for the past 6 months, and I hope it will continue into the future, even when the current crisis is over. The second lesson I would like to derive from the Haggadah this year is the lesson of Jewish peoplehood, which is a relatively new concept. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we didn't use that term. And in Hebrew, it's a brand new term. It's called Amiyut Yehudit, Jewish peoplehood. And I'd like to explain it by talking about the wise son versus the wicked son. You know that the 4 sons are based on 4 verses from the Bible, talking about what you shall tell your children on that night. And the wise son says, Ma edot v'chukim v'mishpatim asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu etchem, Deuteronomy chapter 6. What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which the Lord our God has commanded you? And I'm emphasizing the word you. And what do we say about that wise son? Halakavod, Yasher Koach, we praise him. And then a paragraph later, the Rasha, the wicked son, says, Ma ha'avodah azot lachem, what is this service to you? And we condemn him. And all the commentators say, Was is gefährlich? What's the difference between these two things? Why, when the wise son says, Etchem, you, we say that he's wonderful. And when the wicked son says, Lachem, you, we say that he's terrible. They're both not including themselves in the klal, in the collective Jewish people. And I could give you a sermonic answer, but I'd like to give you the simple answer. And the simple answer is that in many versions of this verse from Deuteronomy, it does not say etchem, it says otanu, us. And this is found in the Septuagint, which the early Greek translation of the Bible from some 2,300 years ago. The Greek there says otanu, us. It is found in the Mechilta, one of the Midrashim of the Tanaim, Parshat Bo, paragraph 18, page 73, for those who want to look it up. And the Mechilta, which has a variant version of the drasha, of the teaching of the four sons, it doesn't say etchem, it says otanu. And in the other parallel to the four sons, which is found in the Talmud Yerushalmi, Tractate of Psachim, chapter 10, halacha number 4, it also says otanu. And in the Vulgate, which is the ancient Latin translation of the Tanakh into Latin from 1600 years ago, it also says otanu. And you could say, well, that's the Greek and that's the Latin and those are Midrashim. What about the Haggadah? Well, if you look in Rabbi Kasher's Haggadah, Haggadah Shlema, which has variant readings from many Haggadah manuscripts, you will find that many Haggadah manuscripts also say otanu and not etchem. And last but not least, I have here a facsimile of the famous Prague Haggadah, printed in Prague in the year 1526. It's the next to last line in very large letters. I don't know if it comes out backwards or frontwards if I'm holding it up. It says very clearly, this side. Asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu otanu. Can you see it? Okay, the last word on the line, second line from the bottom, it says otanu in huge letters, because in the Prague Haggadah, all the letters are huge. They must have had people who had trouble reading. So we see that in the Septuagint and the Vulgate and the Mechilta and the Yerushalmi and Haggadah manuscripts and the Prague Haggadah, it doesn't say Asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu etchem. The wise son says Asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu otanu, which means that there is a huge difference between what the wise son is saying and what the wicked son is saying. The wise son says otanu, us, and the wicked son says ma avodah zot lachem, to you. In other words, the wise son is part of Klal Yisrael, the collective Jewish people, and the wicked son hotzi et atzmo min haklal, he excluded himself from the community. Since the October War began, millions of Jews have stood up and defended the state of Israel. Some 300,000 people attended the rally in Washington, D.C., including some of the people on the screen here. Many plane loads of food and provisions and military equipment were sent to Israel by Jews from the diaspora. The JFNA, the Jewish Federations of North America, raised some $700 million. And many, many other organizations, including Schechter, raised money for emergency projects throughout the state of Israel. All of these Jews represent the wise son. Asher tziva Adonai Eloheinu otanu. On the other hand, some ignorant and misguided Jews, such as Jewish Voice for Peace, or the director Jonathan Glazer at the Oscar ceremony, they say lachem. They say you. We are not part of Klal Yisrael. We are not part of the collective Jewish people. And therefore, the lesson we can learn from this is that it is our job to teach and convince Jews of all ages that they are all part of us. They are all otanu, and that they should emulate the wise son and not the wicked son. The third lesson I would like to learn from the Haggadah this year is the lesson of resilience. One of the most famous passages in the Haggadah is the passage V'hi she'amda. And before I say anything more, Josh, can you pull up the song? We're going to try and play it from YouTube. We hope we succeed. This is a beautiful nigun
Let's hope it
written by
works.
Yonatan Razel in 2008. If it doesn't work, I'll sing it for you.
Tell me if you can hear it.
Arranged by Yonatan himself.
By Yaakov Shweki.
David, you hear?
V'seinu velonu shelo echad bilvod umad oleinu lecha v'seinu umad oleinu lecha v'seinu
Vehi she'amda lavoteinu Vehi she'amda lavoteinu velanu שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו עמד עלינו לכלותנו
הקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מצילנו ימינו
Josh, you can cut it here. Thank you. It's a beautiful song, but it's quite long. It's a very famous passage from the Haggadah. It's introduced by Baruch Shomer Haftachato Yisrael. Blessed be you who keeps his promise to the Jewish people, Genesis 15. That Abraham's offspring shall be oppressed in Egypt for 400 years, and in the end they shall go free with great wealth. And then the next paragraph says, Vihi she'amda, and this promise has stood for our ancestors and for us, for not only one enemy has risen against us to annihilate us, but in every generation there are those who rise against us to annihilate us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, saves us from their hand. I'm holding here one of the many Haggadot that I own, the Haggadah Yisraelit, edited by my friends Noam Tzion and Michel Tzion. And in their Haggadah, opposite the Vihi she'amda, they list 57 wars, pogroms, and attacks against the Jews, beginning with the slavery in Egypt, to the destruction of both temples, to medieval expulsions, to Khmelnytsky, to the Holocaust, to October 7th. And no doubt if they were writing it today, they would have added the attack of 331 missiles on Israel last night. But why? Why have other peoples and religions been trying to kill us for the past 3,500 years? What have we done to deserve this perpetual chain of anti-Semitism, which has resurfaced with a vengeance since October 7th? On the one hand, we can take the passage literally. Despite all of these attempts, God has always saved us, and we have outlived all of our persecutors, from the ancient Egyptians to the Babylonians, to the Romans, to the Cossacks, to the Nazis, and so will we outlive Hamas. On the other hand, we can view this as an act of Jewish resilience. What do Jews do? As Meir Ariel sang in his popular song, which I think we'll skip because of lack of time, as he sang in his popular song, Avarnu et Paro na'avor gam et zeh, we survived Pharaoh, we will survive this too. This is a popular Israeli song from 30 years ago. He's talking about all of his tsaros, and the chorus is, the pizmon is, we survived Pharaoh, we'll survive this too. He's talking about taxes and all sorts of other tsaros that he was having at the time. Precisely because our enemies are constantly trying to destroy us for no reason, we will survive and thrive and flourish. You have to remember, the only reason Iran has a missile program is to destroy the state of Israel. They don't have any enemies. They don't need to defend themselves against anyone. They have spent decades building a missile program for the purpose of destroying the state of Israel. And last night, they tested their missiles on us. And thank God, Israel and the United States and other countries defended us. So unfortunately, there are crazy people who want to kill the Jewish people. And God protects us from them. And in addition, Jewish resilience protects us from them. That throughout history, we have always done whatever we needed to defend ourselves, to defend other Jews, and God willing, that will continue as well. The fourth topic I want to discuss has to do with our attitude towards redemption. In the Talmud, there's a very famous machloket disagreement between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer says that the world was created in the month of Tishrei, and that in the month of Tishrei, the Jewish people will be redeemed. And Rabbi Yoshua, by the way, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua never agree about anything. Rabbi Yoshua says the world was created in the month of Nisan, and the Jewish people will be redeemed in the month of Nisan. And this is why the theme of redemption appears so prominently in the Haggadah. At the very beginning, in that same paragraph, halachma in Aramaic, which we mentioned before, we say, Hashata hacha, Lashana ba'a be'ara d'Yisrael, this year here, next year in the land of Israel. And at the very end of the Haggadah, right before all the songs which were added later, we sing Lashana ba'a b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, and some people now sing Lashana ba'a b'Yerushalayim habnuya, next year in Jerusalem rebuilt. And I'd like to show you a picture, excuse me. I have the Haggadah ready, but it's on the other side of the table. And this is in page 93 of the Shechter Haggadah. I reproduced here a picture from one of the earliest illuminated Haggadot, which is called the Bird's Head Haggadah. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. All of the Jews in this Haggadah have birds' heads. And this is the illustration of Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim. I'll try and hold it a little bit closer to the screen. At the top of the picture, there is a beautiful city, obviously in the style of 13th century Germany. Next to the city, it says one word. It says Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. At the bottom of the picture, you have 4 Jews who have birds' heads pointing up to the Jerusalem in the sky. Okay? What does this picture mean? So as I explain in my caption in the Shechter Haggadah, this picture is referring to a midrash found in various places in rabbinic literature, that when the redemption comes, Yerushalayim Shamala, the heavenly Jerusalem, will simply come down from heaven like on a Hollywood set or in a Broadway musical. Yerushalayim Shamala will come down complete, as they say in Hebrew, complete from the sky. We won't have to build anything. No kablanim, no Israeli contractors to rip you off. It'll come straight from heavens down, complete. Yerushalayim Shamala will land in Yerushalayim Shamata, and we will have a beautiful Jerusalem in which we can then live in the time of the redemption. That is the concept of Yerushalayim Shamala. And clearly, the illustrator of the Bird's Head Haggadah, this is what he thought. In other words, he thought his concept of redemption was that when the Messiah comes, Yerushalayim Shamala will descend from heaven, and the Jewish people will live there happily ever after. But one of the things that we have learned from Herzl and Jabotinsky, Ben Gurion and Begin, Harav Kook and Rabbi Goren, is that we can no longer afford to wait for the Messiah and the heavenly Jerusalem. With faith in God, who gave us the land of Israel some 3,800 years ago, we must continue to build the earthly Jerusalem and to defend the state of Israel from all those who wish to destroy it. So even though Yerushalayim Shamala is a concept in the Midrash, I personally believe that Yerushalayim Shamata, that the earthly Jerusalem, is more important, and the way to reach the heavenly Jerusalem is by building up the earthly Jerusalem. When I made Aliyah to Israel 51 years ago, there were some 250,000 people living in the earthly Jerusalem. Now there are close to 1 million people living in the earthly Jerusalem, including some 300,000 Arabs, which is fine. And this is the way that we have built the state of Israel since 1948. Our best answer to those who wish to destroy us is to continue to build and flourish within the state of Israel. And the final lesson that I would like to stress this year, which is on all of our minds, is the lesson related to the 133 or 134 hostages still being held in Gaza, many of them alive, some of them already deceased. And we must remember them at our time of joy. And the central midrash of the Haggadah includes the verse, Vanitzak el Adonai Elohei Avotenu, Vayishma Adonai et kolenu, ve'et onyenu, ve'et lachatzenu. And we cried to the Lord God of our ancestors, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction and our oppression, which is, of course, a verse from Deuteronomy chapter 26. As we read the verse this year, we will be crying out to God to hear our voice and to see the affliction and oppression, not of the Jews of Egypt, but of the hostages in Gaza. The Midrash continues, Vayishma Adonai et kolenu, the Lord heard our voice, as it is said, Exodus chapter 2, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob. Vayizkor et brito im Abraham, et Yitzchak ve'et Yaakov. We hope and pray that God will hear the groaning of the hostages. And to paraphrase the Haggadah, I would like to end with my little talk here with a prayer. I'll read you first the Hebrew original. In the paragraph Lefichach, we say there, Hotzianu me'abdut lecherut, mi'agon lesimcha, u'me'evel le'yom tov, u'me'afela le'or gadol, u'mishiabud le'geula, v'nomar lefanav shira chadasha, hallelujah. And this is what we hope to say when the hostages are released, that God brought us forth from slavery into freedom, from sorrow into joy, from mourning into festivity, from darkness into great light, and from servitude into redemption. Let us say before him a new song, hallelujah. We hope that within a short amount of time, the hostages will be released, and we will be able to sing this song of thanksgiving unto God. So to summarize, what we tried to do here in a brief amount of time is to learn, we only had time for 5 lessons from the Haggadah this year. The first, the lesson of hospitality. The second, the lesson of Jewish peoplehood. The third, the lesson of Jewish resistance. The fourth, our attitude towards redemption, that we have to roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves. And finally, that at our chief moment of joy, we must remember the hostages who are still in Gaza. Toda Rabah, thank you for listening. And now I would like to segue to our second topic, and which, as you'll see, there is some overlap. Rabbi Chaya Rowan Becker, the dean of the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary, who began her new job this past summer. Little did she know there would be a war in October. She and a bunch of other wonderful people in Israel have put together a supplemental prayer booklet for the Seder this year in Hebrew, which I selected from and translated part of it into English. And all of those who are donors of Schechter will be receiving this prayer booklet within the next few days via Schechter emails. So without further ado, Chaya bevakasha.
Toda. Toda. Yeah. So I'll go in a few minutes. I'll go into in more detail on who is involved in this and who enabled it. I just want to say that, sort of as an introductory idea, I want to say that first of all, thank you all for making the time today to be with us. It's very I don't know, grounding, centering for us to be able to stop thinking about what's out there. And I'm not that we're stopping, we're still talking about it, but to sort of focus on ideas and on learning and on what it is that we're trying to achieve these days, other than just surviving. So thank you for giving us that opportunity. I think that when we think about when we are in when we feel in distress, excuse me, when we feel that we're in distress, it's a moment when we clarify our priorities. Just a tiny story from last night, which was a chaotic night here in Israel. It was sort of something very surreal about knowing that the missiles have left Iran and they're on their way here, and you're sort of in limbo in between. What do we do? We just sit here and wait and see when they're going to land and where they're going to land and what's going to happen. It's a very, very stressful time. I was on my way back from out of town from spending Shabbat out of town with my family, and we got home at 1 o'clock, and we knew that at 2 o'clock the missiles were supposed to land, and so we put our children to sleep and told them to dress warm because at 2 o'clock we'd be waking up and going out to the shelter. And it was all very surreal. And so sure enough, at slightly before 2 a.m., the siren sounded here in Jerusalem, and we ran to the shelter, which is in the bottom floor of our building. And I saw that there's a family there that wasn't a family that lives in the building that wasn't there. It's a family where the father is he's wounded, not war related, and the mother is alone with her 4 children, and she probably was having a hard time coming to the shelter. And this is not a family that we're on very good terms with. Somehow in apartment buildings, things happen, and there are a lot of disagreements with this family. But at that moment, it was obvious that we're not just closing the door and just forgetting about them. I went upstairs to see if she needed help bringing the children down, and sure enough, she wasn't sure if she should wake them up or not wake them up, and she was very, very much in distress. I helped her down with the children, and we closed the shelter door. All this is just to say that in a moment of distress, everything becomes clear. Everything becomes very black and white. And you know what you need to do. And in many ways, this moment of Pesach, it's not one moment, it's many moments. It's moments of getting ready for Pesach and looking forward to Pesach and thinking about Pesach and dreading Pesach. And finally celebrating Pesach, hopefully. These moments are moments of clarity, or they invite us to moments of clarity of, okay, here is our story in a nutshell. Now, what is that story? And out of this sense of let's find the essence of, let's think about what is the meaning now of Judaism in this day, in this generation. Out of that came forth an enormous variety of Seder supplements. I'm sure that all of you have received from one place or another Seder supplements from various organizations. There is a Seder supplement that Miluim people put together in the army. There's a Seder supplement that the families of the hostages put together. There's a Chanaton Seder, and the Reform movement put together a Seder, and Beit Hillel, Rabbanei Beit Hillel put together a Seder. There are lots of resources on the internet. AJR put together some resources, and the RA put together some resources. And I just want to share with you the process and the resources that we put together at Schechter, at the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary, and what makes them slightly different from what makes this supplement different from all other supplements, if you will. So first of all, the process of this supplement started over 2 months ago with a day of learning and of thinking way before anyone was thinking about Pesach. We got together with the encouragement and the support of Marty Hershkowitz, who and his organization Yotzrim Zikaron, Creating Memory. And we said let's think for a second about Pesach, because soon it's going to be Purim and no one will have energy to think about Pesach. We want to catch people before they enter the Purim rush and really stop and think for a moment. But something really interesting happened. We started this process 2 months ago, and it completely changed its form over those 2 months. 2 months ago, we had, as I said, we had a Yom Iyun sitting and studying together with our students, our faculty, and also rabbis and students, rabbinical students from across the board here in Israel, and also people who lead kehilot and wanted to bring the material back to their congregations. And we had 2 main focuses. There was a writing focus and a music focus. Both of them, the musical focus, I'll share a little bit later what happened with that. But the writing focus, we sat and we wrote. We had a writing session of processing and of thinking and of sort of connecting the themes of Pesach with October 7th. And when we approached the work of actually putting together the supplement about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, our editor, Ayelet Escozido, looked at all of the material and she said, I can't do anything with this. These are kinot. These are lamentations. They're not, we can't bring this to the Seder table, because the Seder table is not about lamenting. It's not Yom HaZikaron and it's not Yom HaShoah. The Seder table is about hope, and it's about Exodus, and it's about what values do we bring as a Jewish people to our peoplehood. And we can't be in October 7th on Yud Daled B'Nisan. We can't do that. If we do that, we're sinning to Pesach. So we had another writing session about 3 weeks ago, inviting people to write things from a different perspective. We did end up using some of the materials from the first writing session, but the theme of this supplement is how do we bring interpretations and inspiration and questions to the Seder table in a way that can go along with a classic Haggadah. You can sit with any Haggadah that you want. You can sit with the bird head Haggadah if you have a facsimile of that. You can sit with the Schechter Haggadah. You can sit with any Haggadah that you want. But you sit with this supplement in addition to that, and you can and it's organized in such a way that you can follow along the order of the Seder and use it. I want to share the Hebrew supplement. Oh, do I want to continue? Yeah. I'll show you the Hebrew supplement first, which is more comprehensive than the English supplement, and show some principles in the Hebrew supplement. But then we'll go to the English supplement to see some of the pieces that Rabbi Gorlinkin translated into English and put together a synopsis of this supplement. The supplement starts with some introductory comments, and
maybe you can make it a bit bigger. I don't know if you can, or maybe Josh can.
Yeah, sure.
Yofi.
Okay.
Excellent.
So there's some introductory comments, and then some QR codes. We wanted to keep it short. We ended up with something longer than we intended, but we wanted to keep it short because it can't be a whole nother book. It needs to be something that you can look through and choose a few things and to be very useful, because it's not again, it's not an alternative Haggadah. It's something to be incorporated into our Seders. And I just want to say something very practical for a second. With all of this talk about the values and the themes and whatnot, in the end of the day, we all sit down to a Seder table, those of us who are fortunate enough to be with our families for Seder, which of course we won't all be, but if we are, we sit down to the Seder table with people from different backgrounds, different interests, different ages. It's probably the most challenging Jewish format in terms of content that we have during the year. And with all of this, we want to make something significant. So some of us won't use any of this on Seder night. Some of us might be able to use this before Seder night to read, to get some ideas, to get our own thoughts running, even though we won't bring any of it to the Seder table because of whatever situation we have at the Seder table. But part of that is also to put here some codes to outside sources, for people who want a little bit more or something a little bit different. So we have here codes to take you to, QR codes to take you to the Tali website that has materials that are appropriate for children. And we have a code that will take you to our website with chidonim, with quizzes that Rav Doron Rubin, a recent graduate of ours, was recently ordained by the seminary. He writes a chidon, a quiz every week and for every holiday, and he wrote several for Pesach, and so here you can find them. We didn't put them in the supplement, but you can find them outside of the supplement. Then we proceed to preparations for the Chag. So for lighting the candles, we have a special kavanah. Just make this a little bit smaller so I can see it as well. We have a special kavanah for lighting candles, and of course the bracha for the candles and Shechianu. And then we have a short but succinct list of suggestions of things that we can put on the Seder plate, on the Seder table, themes that we can bring physically into the Seder table. I'll show this to you in English. We'll go through a few of them. Oops, sorry about that. Here, so one of them, of course, is to leave. I think we didn't even say to leave an empty seat. I think that's pretty obvious. One of them is to put a yellow ribbon around the Kiddush cups to mark, to remind us of the hostages. One of them is to add a lemon to the Seder plate, symbolizing, well, also spring, but also the yellow color and the sourness of the lemon, and also the fact that lemon can be made into lemonade and be turned into a symbol of hope. Putting a flower pot rather than flowers with roots to symbolize people being uprooted from their homes and not being able to be in where in their normal place this holiday, and putting anemones on the table, symbolizing the volunteerism that Rav Golinkin was talking about before, and spring and hope, etc. So that's preparation for the holiday, and then we have the supplement organized by the order of the Seder. So not every part of the Seder has additions in the supplement, but here we see Yachatz, and later we'll see Magid up here, and it goes through the Haggadah so that we can sort of follow along. The supplement offers different perspectives. So for example, we have Manishtana, which we're all carrying this year heavily. And then Rav Irena will give an answer referring to the war in Ukraine, and comparing the war in Israel with the war in Ukraine, and carrying those two wars in her kavanah, in her intentions, and referring to this night as a night of distress. Every other night we live in peace and in harmony, and this night we are thinking of two wars. On the other hand, we have Nisi Masban, one of our students, who wrote, every night we are like prey, and there's no one to save us, but now we have the power to save ourselves, referring to different ways of looking at what's happening now in Israel. A lot of people are saying how is this happening? We promised never again. How is this happening? It's like it's the worst disaster for the Jews since the Holocaust, and it reminds us of being helpless. And then some people are saying, but it's not. It's not the same situation. We have a country, we have an army, we have the ability to defend ourselves, which we did not have during the Holocaust. And so these are, two sides of the coin, also reflected here in Ma Nishtana. We have this supplement in addition to, sorry, this keeps getting away from me. In addition to offering thoughts and inspiration and interpretations, we also suggest questions. Here we have, at the end of several sections, we have either here's a thought to contemplate, or a question to open up for discussion at the table. Like this question, for example, at the end of Halach Ma'aniya, when after we sing Hashata Hacha L'Shana Ba'a Be'arad Yisrael, Hashata Avdei L'Shana Ba'a Bnei Chorin. This year we are slaves. Next year, hopefully, we will be free. After we sing those classic words, then we ask, Ma Shinui Shanu Me'achalin. What change do we want this year? Please go around the table and make your suggestions. This year we are what? Next year we should be what? And so, suggestions for discussion and for contemplation around the Seder table. And yeah, finally, I want to read to us one of the passages in English. Two passages, actually, I'll read. One is the passage by Rabbi Maayan Belding Sidon, another recent graduate of ours, who wrote about Halach Ma'aniya. Again, taking the bread, the lechem oni, the bread of affliction, the matzah, and bringing it to today. But before that, I wanted to read Marty Hershkowitz's passage before. Marty Hershkowitz challenges us to think about what is our generation's story. Okay, so in every generation, a person must see the light to guide his way in the darkness. This is echoing B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Every person in every generation needs to see themselves as if they left Egypt. So Marty Hershkowitz opens the question broader. In every generation, a person must see the light to guide his way in the darkness. In every generation, a person must hear the whisper that has been silenced and respond with tears. Sorry. In every generation, a person must hear the whisper that has been silenced and respond with tears. In every generation, man must taste the bitterness of existence, and he can learn to embrace. In every generation, a person must smell a scent of burnt expectations and learn to mourn. In every generation, a person must learn to touch and be touched, and then he can impart. In every generation, a person must learn to dream so that he can will himself to endure. So Rabbi Maayan Belding Sidon brings this every generation interpretation to Halach Ma'aniya, to the bread of affliction. And she says the following: Halach Ma'aniya, this is the bread of affliction, that our freedom elevates to holiness, that our ancestors ate, the Achlu Avatana. But what of our siblings? What are they eating now? In the land of Egypt, Be'arad Mitzrayim, in the narrow place. Mitzrayim plays on Mitzar, narrow place. There in the narrow tunnels, is there any bread left at all? All who are hungry, come and eat. Every dry pita that keeps them alive is also elevated to holiness. All who are in need, come and partake in the Passover. By the merit of our fathers and mothers, by the merit of our pleas and our prayers, by the merit of the heroism, the chesed, the generosity, may the angel of death pass over them too. And may God bring them out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. This year, they are there in the hands of the enemy, and so are we. Next year, in the land of Israel, sitting at the head of the table, dressed in white, singing Seder songs. Once they will tell their children, we were slaves, and now we are free. Before we finish, I want to share a story. I'm not going to share the text in English. I'll just try to loosely translate the Hebrew. Story of that was published recently in Besheva, a newspaper called Besheva, or an online paper, but composed by Rav Lior Chaim Engelman, which echoes the text that I just read by Rabbi Maayan. He just really very loosely, I'll just tell the story. He just writes a story about a woman asking a man, "You think it's okay?" And he says, he says, "What's okay?" So she says to him, "Well, eating pita instead of matzah. Didn't you say that you were religious? It's chametz, isn't it?" So he says to her, "Touch these pita. Do you think they're pita? They're not pita. They're so hard. It's like matzah. So this will be the matzah. This is the bread of affliction. This is our bread of affliction." So she says, "Okay, so that's matzah. Okay, what about maror?" So he says to her, "Maror, you still need maror? Look around. You still need maror?" So she says, "Okay, we have matzot, we have maror." And he goes on and describes how they sit there in the tunnels, obviously, and hold each other and support each other, and how they didn't know each other before, but now they're all that they have for each other. And he tells her about the holiday in his house, and she tells him about the holiday in her house. And he says, "Well, of course they won't have any wine here, but we can have 4 cups because I saved a cup from here and I saved a cup from there, and we'll drink water instead of wine." And he saved a potato from some meal, so they're using the potato, and they have a Leil Seder down there in the tunnels, to a man and a woman who never knew each other before, eating pita on Leil Seder, and just a little bit of Israeli culture, maybe missing in the translation here, is that it's sort of a symbol of being chiloni, to eat pitot on Pesach, right? Ochel pitot bePesach is like, I really don't care about Pesach at all. I eat pitot on Pesach. So here Rav Engelman takes this theme of eating pita on Pesach and turns it into the matzah. Finally, they continue and they go through the Haggadah because he knows it by heart from his childhood, and they take a bite from the pita, and then he says to her, "Now open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi." And she says, I can't, how can I open the door? We can't open the door. We can't go anywhere. We're stuck here. And then he finishes his story by saying that night, 7 months later, 7 months after 7 months into their entrapment, Eliyahu Hanavi opened the door, but he was wearing uniform, Eliyahu, and he shot a lot, Eliyahu. And he didn't have a beard like Eliyahu, but he yelled Shema Yisrael, and he burst in with a lot of small Eliyahus in olive-colored uniform. And they took them home. And on the way home, Eliyahu said to them that they had miscounted, that there were still a few more days until Leil Seder, and they would be home for Leil Seder. And this story, why am I telling you this story? Other than it's just I was very moved to read the story, I don't know if everything came across in my quick summation in English, but this story is this story and the story of all these supplements is telling us something wonderful about Israeli society. And now I'm not talking about anything having to do with the war or anything having to do with this Pesach this year. What we do here at the Rabbinical Seminary and Machon Shechter and Tali and Midreshet Shechter and a lot of other organizations in Israel that are working tirelessly for years to encourage Israelis to embrace Jewish identity and to become active with their Jewish identity and to learn about their Jewish identity. We see an amazing thing happening here with all of this creativity around Pesach, this story that I told you now, and all these supplements coming out from the woodworks. And that is that people have claimed Pesach in a way that I've never seen before. We know that Leil HaSeder is the evening that a high percentage of Israelis celebrate, but many of them only have a meal and they call that Leil HaSeder, and many of them read the Haggadah not having it mean anything to them, and they call that Leil HaSeder. But this year, something amazing has happened with Leil HaSeder and Jewish identity in Israel. And I don't think we've seen it happen also on Purim. Purim, so many people marked Ta'anit Esther, people who never knew about Ta'anit Esther before, marked Ta'anit Esther because they said, I can't celebrate Purim without some kind of context that will bring Purim into this reality and to make it make sense in some way. And the same thing is happening with Pesach, is I can't just have a fun evening with my family with food that I like and songs that I like without understanding what this all means to me as a Jew, as an Israeli, as a human being. What does all of this mean to my identity as a person? And to try to make sense of this. And so being a part of that, we sort of went back and forth with ourselves because we saw everyone producing these supplements and we said, wait a second, everyone's making these supplements. So what, but we said, no, this is what we do this year. This is what Israelis are doing this year. And we are also doing that. We're making Leil HaSeder relevant. We're making it part of our story. We're making it be, we're making it become really a holiday of significance and not just of tradition that, that we grew up on. And I just want to finish with saying, I'll just share what I wrote in my introduction, which is that my friend and colleague, Rabbi Deborah Newman-Kamen, who's a rabbi of a congregation in the Chicago area, told us on the list of the women rabbis. She told the story of the Megillah that her congregation has, that was scribed by the founding rabbi of the congregation, Rabbi William Frankel, when he was a 15-year-old boy in Vienna in 1938, hiding from the Nazis, waiting with his family to flee to the United States. And she said that the story is that he was closed in his house and they were afraid to go out because of everything that was going on outside. They were afraid to go outside. And what could he do? He wrote Megillat Esther. And this was so moving to me to hear, because we in Israel were thinking, how can we even read Megillat Esther? How can we have the audacity of celebrating Purim with everything that's going on? What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And then here came this story that told us that a young man in Vienna in 1938 found koach, found strength in the story of Megillat Esther, closed in his house, fearing for his life, because the story of Megillat Esther, he was praying for that to be his story. And here we approach Pesach, and I wrote to Rabbi Newman-Kamen how moved I was by that story, and she wrote to me this other story. She said, his son, many years later, got on the bima and told us all that the headmaster of his school, of the father's school, of Rabbi William Frankel's school, on the last day of school, before the Nazis closed down their school, the headmaster brought all the children together and told them, he said, one day the Nazis will be gone and Jewish children will still be singing Shema Yisrael, will still be reciting Shema Yisrael. And that story is the story that I take with me into Pesach, to tell ourselves one day this war will be gone, this war with all of the awful, awful things that are happening to everyone involved in it. This war will be gone, and Jewish children will still be singing Ma Nishtana. And our job this year at Leil HaSeder is to be like that boy in his house, reading our stories and finding ourselves in the story and finding the essence of who we are and what we need to be and telling that story.
That was beautiful, very moving. And that is a beautiful segue from some modern stories to some Hasidic sparks from the Haggadah by Rabbi Dr. Reb Mimi Feigelson, who is the Mashpia Ruchanit and a senior lecturer at the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary. Mimi, bevakasha.
Shalom, shalom. It's a gift to be here together. And the amount of emails and texts I've been getting from all over the world, especially from the US, has been very heartwarming today. So those of us who have learned together before, you know that I always start with a nigun, with some kind of singing and an opening prayer. And as listening to Rabbi Golinkin, as listening to Rabbi Chaya, I'm thinking about maybe we'll sing this, maybe we'll sing this, maybe we'll sing this. So here we are. And we'll sing this. And each one of us will make from it what it is that we need in this moment. ריבונו של עולם, אחד ויחיד, אחד ויחידה, divine mother. קרב יום אשר הוא לא יום ולא לילה. We actually are coming out of 24 hours that day wasn't day and night wasn't night. And we're praying for that moment when, as my teachers tonight have shared, we're waiting for the moment when it comes a day and a night of blessing and of joy and of celebration. I want to share with you a few thoughts that I have, and really drawing from the Hasidic teachings and the Hasidic masters that feed me so divinely, and thinking about how we enter into the Seder this year and how we enter into the Seder differently. And so I want to share a couple of thoughts, and there's a teaching of the Ishbitzer Rebbe that I want to share as well. It's in your chat, and I'll also put it up on the screen. So there's nothing like sharing traditions, and I think part of the question we're going to have this year is what traditions are we going to hold on to, and what traditions are going to be new kinds of traditions. I want to share with you a few of my traditions that I've collected over the years, and the gift of being at every year at a Seder with some people that are the same and some people that are new is that over the years we collect more and more traditions. And one that feels close in sad ways, in some way, is in our Seder, our adopted Bubby was, thank God, a survivor. In their home, they would sing the Song of the Partisans before Birkat Hamazon, and connecting the uprise of the Warsaw Ghetto and Seder night. And I know that, I don't know about you, but I can tell you honestly, in my kitchen right now, these days since the beginning of the war, is until this war, until Simchat Torah, when I would peel too much of a vegetable, I'd say, oh, you know, there was a time that would have been food, and for you it's a part of a peel. And now I'm doing that with the chatufim, with the kidnapped. I'm saying, oh, for you, you're throwing it out. But if it was available to one of the hostages, that would be their food. And there's some conversations inside of me that have shifted. And I want to share with you two traditions that I actually hold on to. And it's actually one tradition based on two stories and a teaching. One is, I remember from my teacher, Reb Shlomo Carlebach, and he would say, it can happen, it shouldn't happen, but it can happen that we sit at our Shabbat table without a Shabbat guest. I actually have a friend who, when she goes to shul Shabbat morning and sets the table, she always sets an extra setting for someone that she'll invite home from shul that day. And what a gift when someone walks in and it's as if saying, we've been waiting for you all the time. So she's been doing this for years, every Shabbat. And so Reb Shlomo would say it's impossible to sit at a Shabbat table without a guest, but it happens. But on Seder night, anyone should come and eat. And he says, we don't like go walk out on the streets and looking for someone, right? Someone poor, someone impoverished. So I found myself asking myself that question, well, what do I do with this understanding that I can't sit at the Seder table without someone who's impoverished? So that's one teaching. And then there's a story of the Tzanzer Rebbe. And the story of the Tzanzer Rebbe is that he would, on his Seder table, he would put all the gold and the silver that they had in their home. Why? Because if you can put out your riches, that means that you're free. You're not afraid to hide all the gifts that you are bestowed with. And again, thinking to myself, what do these riches look like, and who or what are these riches? And I put together these two teachings, one of Reb Shlomo and having poor person at the table, and the other is this tradition of the Tzanzer Rebbe from 200 years ago to put his riches, all the gold and silver on the table. And I would start my Seder, and I start my Seder every year with, okay, for one moment, we're all going to be the impoverished person. And in what are we impoverished this year? And then we go around and say, okay, and what are my riches that I can put on my table? And, you know, one year it was I'm impoverished with time, or I'm impoverished with Shabbat invitations to meals. My riches are something I learned with my students that changed my life. Those are my riches. So I wanna share this also as a way of who knows this year who are going to be sitting with the Seder. The world is continuously between now and Seder night. There's like a million worlds to still happen and unfold. But I want to share that as an invitation. What are the riches that we share? Where are the places that we are impoverished? I want to share with you a teaching of the Ishbitzer Rebbe, the Mea Shiloach. And I call this, we're all the children of the Sheino Yodea Lish'ol. This year, we're all the children of the one who doesn't know how to doesn't know what to ask. And I want to say, it's not that he doesn't know what to ask. I want to say that in rabbinic teachings, the word lada, to know, has to do with intimacy. Similar to when we read the pasuk, V'hadam yada et Chava ishto. And Adam was intimate with Chava, with Eve, his partner. It wasn't that he knew what her favorite book is, or he knew what her favorite color is, but there was an intimacy. And I want to say that this year we're all the children of the one who doesn't know how to lish'ol, in terms of how do we find our core questions right now, and core questions that will allow us to be other. I want to say, how is this night different than all other nights? It's not only about what's happening in the world, and it's not only about our family, but I want to say, how are we different? How are we different this year? How are we coming to the Seder table differently? And what are the questions that I want to say that there are questions that people want to be able to ask and don't dare utter those words. You know, in the first weeks after the war, and still, I know I wrote this to one of my colleagues just today, because she sent me a text, one of my colleagues from Los Angeles, Rabbi Mishama Sagia, and she said, thinking about you, and I said to her, you know, I don't know what's harder. I mean, we're here, but you've been leading a community in America for the last 6 months. I want to say, how are you doing what you're doing? And I want to say that's a way in which to think of ourselves of like, who are we this year? How do we come to the Seder table differently? And do we have the courage to ask questions differently than other years? I want to say, not only ask ourselves questions that are different, but I also want to say, ask God questions that are different. And whatever that statement that I just made is to you, what does it mean to ask God different questions? You know, I feel there was a lot of silence right after Simchat Torah. There was a lot of silence from the rabbis for quite a few days, because I think we were all thrown into having to ask ourselves, different kinds of questions, and what can we say with integrity? And so I want to say that the Talmud says this, and Rashi quotes this in a very known moment when Rashi forgets to, at the end of the meal, to have the third cup, and the Talmud says, and Rashi explains this as Atacha de Rachamana Samachinan. We're sitting at God's table, right? We do all the work, we do all the cleaning, we do all the shopping and the cooking, we do all the traveling. But Seder night is sitting at God's table. And then I want to say that sitting at God's table means, what does it mean to be honest about who we are? To be honest. You know, I have this fantasy, I've never done it, but I have a fantasy of setting a Seder table. And on the Seder table, there are 4 forks and 4 knives. And throughout the evening, who's eating? Who are we feeding? The Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, the She'ino Yodea Lishol. Which one of the 4 are we in any given moment? So sitting at God's table is asking of us to be honest with who we are. And even being able to say hard things to God. Because if one thing I know about God is that God can hear it all. And God can carry it all. And God, the God that I believe in, is bigger than anything that I can imagine. So here we are. I want to share with you this teaching, which I hold on to. And first, I want to say the premise is actually a short teaching of the Ba'or Einaim. Rebbe Nachum Mendel of Chernobyl, the first Chernobyl Rebbe, his son Reb Motele, had 6 sons and multiple daughters. Each one of those sons has created a dynasty of their own. And any of the Twerskis that you know, they're all descendants of the Ba'or Einaim, the light of the eye, the first Chernobyl Rebbe. Denver, Milwaukee, Colorado, I mean, Israel, Boston. And he asked on the Pasuk, V'Yisrael ahavet Yosef, and Israel loved Yosef. And we know, I want to say one thing about this, is there are multiple names that both of them carry. Yeah, Israel has multiple names, and Yosef has multiple names. Tzofnat Paneach, for example, Israel Yaakov, we know that. And the Ba'or Einaim says the following: Hinei noda, for it is known, Heyot HaTorah nitzchit bechol adam ubechol zman v'kadma la'olam. So first I'm going to pause here for a moment. He says, we know. And when in the Hasidic teachings it says noda, it's his way of saying, in the mystical traditions, everybody knows. The Torah is eternal in every person, in all times, and takes presence to the world. We know there are 7 things that existed before creation. The Talmud tells us that. We're taught, Istakel ba'oraita uvara alma. God even looked into the Torah as God's blueprint, and with that created the world. So the Torah that we read is not only the story as it's told, but it's actually the essence of who we are. We all have Israel part of us. We have a Yosef part in us. We have a Sarah, Avraham, Sarah. We have a Hagar part in us. These are all different identities. For the Jungians among us, that would be it's an amazing way of reading Torah and of looking at Torah. And he says that this is the truth, that we need to look at the Torah. It is eternal. אלא שנתלבשה בסיפורי המעשיות כפי הזמן, דהיינו בעת שהיו האבות אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, להתלבשה התורה בסיפורי המעשיות שלהם. אך מכל מקום צריך להיות בכל הזמן. So he says something here that could almost be blasphemous to think about and to hear. He says there was a moment when the Torah was crystallized. You know, I think of it like a snowflake. There's in one moment it's a gas, and then another moment it's a snowflake. And if it was another millisecond before or after, the snowflake would be somewhat different. He said, this is the Torah that we were given. These are the stories that we were given. But it's not only about them. It's also about every person, every generation. What that means is that for him, it's not when the Haggadah says, Chayat kol adam lirot et atzmo ki yotzam b'chol dor v'dor, we have to see ourselves as if we come out of Egypt. I want to say it's not even something that happens once a year. Coming out of Egypt can be every day, right? In those places that we are in mitzvah, we are contracted. In those places that we have one way of thinking about something. That's a moment of Mitzrayim, the paradigm of what Mitzrayim is. And Yisrael, Li Rosh, is an expansive consciousness. These are paradigms to think about. We get locked into it. And if I didn't have my deans here and my bosses here, I would say that for some people, a 9 to 5 job, that's Mitzrayim. That's Egypt, being locked into a position that you get to work at 9 and you leave at 5. But what about creativity? And what about my spirit and my, right? But then someone say, but how wonderful, 9 to 5. I know exactly what's expected of me, what to do, what I need to do. And I'm great. I know exactly, I'm actually fulfilling what it is that I've been brought into the world to do. So I want to say this teaching of the Me'or Einayim is saying it's not only when we sit down to the Seder, it's not only when we tell the Haggadah, when we read these sources, that's a moment of coming out of Egypt. But I want to say those moments that we have an insight for a moment, where'd that come from? And in that way, I want to bring this teaching from the Mea Shiloach, the Ishbitzer Rebbe. Many of you know that I can't live without him. And it's actually not, it's not on the Haggadah, and it's not on the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of coming out. But actually, for me, it's about what Egypt is and what Yisrael is, what coming out of Egypt is, what walking through a desert looks like, and what finally coming to Eretz Yisrael is. And it's actually on the pasuk from Parshat Balak, Ki lo nachash beYaakov, velo kesem bYisrael, ka'et ya'amer liYaakov u'liYisrael ma pa'al el. Okay, so we have this word, Ki lo nachash beYaakov. It is not a divination in Yaakov. We also see the word nachash when we think of the snake. And velo kesem bYisrael, and there's not an element of magic when in Yisrael. Ka'et, now, we will know, Ya'amer liYaakov v'Yisrael, they will both know what God is doing. For the Mea Shiloach, for the Ishbitzer Rebbe, these are two paradigms. What is it to be a Nachash? What is it to be Kesem? What is Yaakov? And what is Israel? So Nachash, he says, Inyan Nachash, hu it'akshut bedavar mibli hasir davar ze midato. Lines number 2 and 3. Nachash is, let me say in Hebrew, nechishut dat. There is this decisiveness. There is something that takes a hold on us, and we can't set ourselves free of it. Right? How many times do we have something has to happen? We know it has to happen, and whatever we do, we're going to make it happen no matter what. That is this nachash element. And you can think about the snake who wraps itself around a person, around a tree, around this way we coil ourselves around this idea, around this reality that has to happen. The kesem on line 4, the kesem hu lehefech. Kesem is just the opposite. The hainu meaning, im hu mesupak badavar, im la'asot o lo, if a person is in doubt whether to do this or not, ro'en yelech lo kashura v'kaseder yaseh, v'im lav lo yaseh. He should see how things unfold, but in their own merit, and then he will know what to do. So I remember Reb Shlomo I once didn't know whether I should go somewhere or not. And actually Reb Shlomo said, I said to him, should I go or not? And the way he answered that was, will they miss you if you're not there? If they won't miss you, it's okay. But if they'll miss you if you're not there, then you should go. So that was one way of thinking about it. But I think here he's offering us a different description. And he's even in lines 14 and 15, he brings a story of Rav that was supposed to go somewhere, was in doubt whether he should go or not. So he said, I'll go down to the river and I'll see. If a ferry comes, then I know I'm meant to go. And if not, not. Now what this means is if you're in doubt whether or not, then you go out to here in Yerushalayim, where I live, I'd go out to Rehov Palmach. I'd walk out to Palmach Street and I'd see if a cab comes or not. I wouldn't walk out in the front door of my home, which is Mevoy Oram, which is it's a street of like 100 yards, 100 meter, and it has a dead end and a park at the end. No, I have to go out somewhere where it's plausible, where it's possible. Now, what is being said here, what Bilam is saying here is, Ki lo nachash b'Yaakov, when we are in a Yaakov state of being, when we're in a contracted consciousness, when we're not sure what to do and how to be, when we're not sure whether this is right or wrong, he says, we don't force it. We're not a nachash when we're in this Yaakov state of being. Velo kesem b'Yisrael. But on the other hand, when we're in an Yisrael state of mind, when we're in expanded consciousness, when we have clarity what needs to happen, then we need to make it happen. And we don't say, oh, we'll just wait around and see what's happening. I want to say these last 6 months, if you can see on my page, I want to show you this for a moment, that we're on 150 plus 41 days, right? And I'll say something about that in a moment. There are people in these last 191 days that are asking, are we Yaakov? Are we Israel? Do we need to wait and see what happens? Do we need to make things happen? And then the pasuk tells us, but we know ka'et ya'amer li'Yaakov Yisrael ma pa'al el. We actually, if we bring God into this conversation, then we can have a moment of clarity in the lack of clarity. Right? We can ask ourselves whether this is a Yaakov moment. Do I hold on? Do I let go? Is this a Yisrael moment where I need to make things happen? And I think you can hear both from Rabbi Galinkin's words and from Rabbi Chaya's words, right? How this inner conflict is going on within us all the time in terms of what it is we're meant to be. Who are we in this moment? And one day I think we're a Yaakov moment, and one day moment I think we're a Israel moment. And how do we find a way, I want to say, to hear each other as and being able to identify when we are in a contracted consciousness moment, when we are in expansive consciousness moment. I want to show you this. I want to go back to the top of the page, and this is how I've been writing. I've been writing at my dates, 150 plus 41 days to the hostages. And whoever sees my source sheets since the war says to me, why is 150 plus 41? Why don't you write 191? And I wanna say that it's true that when people ask me, I say that I live in Poland of the 19th century with visitation rights to the 21st century. Definitely when I walk into an electronics store. But even my students know, my friends know that there's a part of me that's always in Poland with the Rebbe's, and that's really the way it is. I mean, honestly, I walk in to buy a telephone. I say, hi, my name is Mimi. I live in Poland of the 19th century with visitation rights to the 21st century. And you can either help me buy a phone or you can make a joke out of me. Whatever it is, this is how much money I'm willing to spend, and you're going to help me with the phone. I'm serious. That being said, we have now, I want to say, Rebbes, masters, spiritual teachers and masters in our midst. If you listen to any one of the family members of the hostages now, they are all our teachers. They are all our Rebbes. And we need to listen to them and to listen to how they speak and what they're saying. And there were so many different Hasidic masters, and everyone has to find their way to the Rebbe that speaks their language, but they're there. And I want to say tonight, I want to shout out tonight about Rachel Goldberg Poland and John, her husband, and their kids, the parents of Hirsch. Rachel has been saying Psalms every day to the number of the days that Hirsch and all the hostages have been taken hostage. And every day she'd say the Psalm of Tehillim that goes along with it. And I joined her for a while doing this as well in my home. People asked me what was going to happen when she came to 150. And if they weren't home yet, what was she going to do? And I said, I don't know. Maybe she'll go on to another book, or maybe she'll go to Iyov or to Kohelet or to, I don't know. And then on the 150th day, she said the following. She said, Tehillim Kuf Nun, Psalm 150, is a psalm of praise. Hallelu el b'krutsho, halu b'irki ozo, halu kirov godlav. And she said, I don't want to give up on God's praise. I don't want to. We have to hold on to God's praise no matter what is happening. So from now on, if Hirsch and the other hostages are not home tomorrow, then I will say 150 and 1. And I will say Psalm 150 and Psalm 2. And that means that today she's saying Psalm 150 and 41. And yes, it's true that I want to say for each one of the families, it's 191 days. But Rachel is being a Rebbe as being our teacher, and she's teaching us how to hold on. I want to say how to hold on to Yaakov and Yisrael at the same time. She's saying, Ka'et yamer Yaakov Yisrael ma pa'al el. Now we know, right? Now Yaakov and Yisrael know what God is doing. And she is asking of us to hold on to both of these voices within us. So I wanna say one last thing, and that is, and I have to get out of here. How do I unshare? Stop share. Thank you. Okay. I wanna say just one more thing about this. I've merited to walk in God's world and so many worlds that I could have never imagined that I would walk in, and so many different communities that have opened their home to me and their heart to me, and the Shechter world, the conservative movement. I've been really very gifted, very, very gifted. And there's one thing that I always say, and I want to hold this consciousness for Seder night. We share our questions. I think we're most lonely with our questions. And we're most alone with our questions. And we need to know that we're not alone with our questions. With our answers, we'll find a way to be in the world. We'll find a way to walk in the world. But I want to say, who is it that we share our questions with? And for me, I think if there's something that I can say since Simchat Torah, and there's not a lot I can say, to be honest, is that I have a lot of questions. And I think if there's something that Seder night tells us is, this year, it's not about the answers. The Haggadah gives us answers. The supplement to the Haggadah is offering us now different ways of answers. But I want to ask us to be courageous this year, to ask questions that we never allowed ourselves to ask, to bring questions to the table that we never thought we had permission to ask, or there would be a place to ask them. And the graciousness of our heart is to be able to sit and to listen to each other's questions. And I want to say, being free means that you are free to ask questions, and you also can sit in the silence before you offer an answer. I'll share with you a sweet moment to close with. One year when I was teaching my rabbinical students, and I start every class with a nigun and an opening prayer and close it with a closing prayer. And there was one nigun of Bobov Hasidim, the dynasty that comes out of Tzand. And there's a moment in the middle of the nigun that there's a pause, a silent moment in the middle. And I told my students that if they don't learn to hold the pause, I will flunk them at the end of the semester. I don't care how much Mishnah and Gemara they know, but if they cannot hold that moment of silence in the middle of a thinking, then they don't understand what we're talking about. Torah is not only about the black letters, it's about the white spaces. I say this all the time. So I want to bless us, and I pray that we have, on the one hand, the courage to bring our unasked questions, to challenge ourselves with new questions. I pray that we have the strength and the ability to sit a moment in silence, to be liberated in that silence, and sometimes to allow the questions to be, and to not need always an answer. And I can tell you that I've been sitting with God since Simchat Torah in a way that never before. And I'm sitting with a lot of questions and answers, sometimes Chacham, sometimes Rasha, sometimes Tam, and sometimes even God is She'eno Yodea Lishol. Sometimes even God is the one who does not know how to ask.
Toda rabba, Reb Mimi. Thank you very much. We thank Josh Schumann for organizing this event. We thank Rabbi Chaya, Reb Mimi. We thank all of you. We wish all of you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. We hope and pray that in the near future, the hostages will be redeemed from captivity, as our ancestors were from Egypt. And if you look in the chat, there are two things. If you'd like to buy the Schechter Haggadah, there's a link there to do that. And number two, God willing, in November, we're having our 40th anniversary mission by hook or by crook. We're celebrating the renovation of the building that I'm sitting in, our library and administration building. And you're all welcome to join us from November 18th to 23rd. There is a link in the chat to our website, which has the information, the itinerary, the information about the mission, the 40th anniversary mission. We would love for you to join us. And in the meantime, we wish all of you a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and may you all be safe wherever you are. Toda Rabah.